There's no darkness in God, none at all. There's no shadows. God doesn't do one thing and then pull the rug out from underneath you later. That's not what God's like. And here's what Paul is saying in Ephesians. He's saying you can be healed in such a way that the wound that you've been through, remember, everything is illuminated, becomes a light. The wound you've been through can become a source of light for someone else. So here's the instinct you need to have as you and I work through this together. It needs to be confession. Brittany said it beautifully. It's a way of saying, the word literally means to say the same. Yeah, that's what it is. That's the truth. It's Taylor Swift. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. You need that. You got it? So just real briefly, I'm going to touch on 5 places of darkness, just briefly, and then we're going to get into the light, okay? So if this feels heavy, stay with me. Here's 5 dark places in our world. First, I'm just going to call it body darkness. Body darkness. What do I mean? Well, we feel a sense of disconnection within ourselves and between other people, and we can't figure out how to meet that sense of disconnection, and maybe we don't even understand that's what's going on. And so what we've collectively done as a society, is we turn to some kind of an addiction. There's all these studies they've done on addiction, and what they've discovered is that addiction is really a way to reach out for and complete connection that's missing. That's what's really going on. And I think I'm going to call them the 3 S's of addiction today. A substance of some sort, social media, and then subtraction, where we use a device and we remove ourselves from a place and being around people with a device. And what it is addiction is a connection looking for a home. And so what we do is we try to meet that connection with a fake alternative. I'll give you an example. My mom was very much into health food before health food and organic food was a thing. And so she knew somehow way back in the day that sugar was not great for you. I know sugar is delicious, still love sugar to this day. And so when something was made with cocoa and it was sweetened with milk chocolate, there was this alternative, and I just want to warn you against its evils and wiles. Not cocoa is known as carob. If you ever see an ingredient list and it says carob, do not trick yourself into believing it is chocolate. Beloved, it is not chocolate. It is fake. It is disgusting. But that's what addiction is. It's a fake alternative that we turn to meet our need for connection. And so what happens is your body itself goes into darkness and doesn't know what's important and doesn't know which way to go and settles for a substitute. And so what happens over time is that addiction becomes the darkness itself. And the addiction isn't a light switch. We think it is, but it's not. It doesn't turn on any kind of light. There's body darkness. Second, I'm going to call it affection darkness. Affection darkness. What do I mean? Well, you're in a relationship and it doesn't work, or it's not working. You have something that you hope is going to happen in your life, is going to work out for you. It's a job or education or something you're working really hard toward, and it just doesn't look like it's happening, or it didn't happen. And what was really important to you was that relationship worked out, or that thing you hoped would happen. And what you've done is you put pressure on them to make you feel okay, and they're just not working out. And they're not happening the way that you want. And here's what happens then. The heart spirals into the darkness of things like bitterness and jealousy and cynicism and unhealed grief. And it just gets oppressive and dark, and you don't know how to get out of it. And you wake up thinking about it, and you go to sleep thinking about it, and you just don't know how to get out of this affection darkness. Here's how Paul said it in Ephesians 4. He said, hey, get rid of all bitterness and rage and brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. In other words, the invitation for us is into kindness and compassion and healed relationships, and instead our affections are darkened. And it's like a candle. You know, your candle's burning, and you have one of those snuffers, and it snuffs the light out. And affection darkness, it snuffs the light out and everything gets dark. There's sin darkness. That's when you have choices that you make that lead you down the wrong path. And eventually what happens is those choices become patterns. Jesus said it in John chapter 3. He's talking about light and darkness. He said, this is the verdict. Lights come into the world, but people loved darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. This is actually a really brilliant insight. Think about this with me for a second. Here's what Jesus is saying is we're going through things and we're reaching for some satisfaction or some sense of relief, and we don't want to be seen because we're afraid we'll be judged for what we're trying to do. And so what we do is we cover our actions with darkness, is this way Jesus describes it. And what happens is we end up loving that darkness because we see it as the solution to getting what we want. And here's what happens is it creates inside of us a negative feedback loop. So we make decisions in the darkness, and then we go further into the darkness, and surprise, surprise, life just gets darker. Not brighter. We think it's going to get brighter. We think going deep into but it doesn't. It just gets darker. And the end result of that is we get ourselves into a pattern. Here's just a few verses later in chapter 8. Jesus says it like this. He says, hey, listen, I'm telling you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now, a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to that forever. So in other words, what we do is we orphan ourselves, and we say, I don't belong to anybody, and we put ourselves into servitude when we've been invited to be a beloved son or daughter, and we think that this choice, this sin, will be a light switch, and it's not. It doesn't turn anything on. Then there's, this is kind of plain, but we don't talk about it much, demonic darkness. You can't read the ministry of Jesus, you can't read the ministry of the apostles in the book of Acts and not see that what they did was encounter dark forces that we don't fully understand today. And that demonic oppression, generational oppression on people, that what Jesus did and then the disciples in following Jesus in the book of Acts is routinely would set people free from demonic oppression. Here's how John says it in one of his other writings. He says, the one who does what's sinful is of the devil, because the devil has been sinning from the beginning. But now notice what he says about Jesus and why Jesus came. The reason the Son of God appeared was, what's the word? Could you say it out loud with me? Was to what? Destroy the devil's work. So it goes like this. Like if you put yourself in the place of addiction, or you put yourself in the place of needing those affections to be met, or you put yourself in a place of sin, what happens is it's like lights on the runway. If you've driven past the airport at night and you see the lights on the runway and they're doing this, and what that does is that tells the plane, hey, right here, this is where you land right. You want to land? Right here, right here, right here. And when you put yourself in the place of addiction and affection darkness and sin darkness, it's like lights on the runway. And what you're doing is you're inviting a sense of oppression. And I'm trying to tell you that what Jesus wants to do is to destroy the devil's work in your life and to destroy the oppression you are under. If you are feeling like there is a sense of darkness that you cannot seem to lift, and it is bigger than you and you don't understand it, can I just suggest that might be demonic darkness? And Jesus came to destroy that. Here's the last one. It's kind of surprising. It's in the text. It's religious darkness. Jesus makes this beautiful statement, I'm the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but have the light of life. And the religious leaders essentially say, really? And they turn to their pedigree and they say, we're sons of Abraham. We're the ones who keep the laws of Moses. How dare you say something like that? You're not the source of light. Those laws, those rules are. And they're mad at Jesus repeatedly because Jesus would heal a man on the Sabbath or someone on the Sabbath, and Jesus is routinely breaking the religious law. It was a religious law. You're not supposed to do any work on the Sabbath. And they said when Jesus healed somebody, he was doing work on the Sabbath. So he was breaking the religious law. And if you notice the ministry of Jesus, he constantly, it's almost like he just puts it in their face. He's like, I'm going to heal somebody on the Sabbath to see how you respond. Now, here's what religious darkness looks like, is they can't let go of their religious assumptions long enough to see that God is at work in someone's life. Well, they're not doing it right. They're breaking the rules. How could that be God at work? And they don't want to see that they aren't free. And here's what happens when you're in religious darkness. You believe that if you keep all the rules, that you will turn the lights on in your life. And I'm just here to tell you, religious rules aren't one of life's light switches. There's nothing wrong with religious rules per se, but they're not going to turn on the lights. You keeping them all is not going to make all the lights come on in your life, no matter what someone has told you. Let me give you an example. One of my favorite books is a book by John Bunyan that was known. It's called The Pilgrim's Progress. You still read it. It's an allegorical tale of this boy, this man named Christian, and his journey to the celestial city. It's maybe one of the most well-sold books in the last 500 or so years. I recommend you get it. Get it in the Old English, so it's hard to read, but it's beautiful in the way that it's written. But John Bunyan recognized that religious darkness was a thing, and that the laws of Moses, if you just keep them for their sake, that they won't bring healing to you. And so I'm going to read you a little section here of when Christian experiences Moses and the law on his way to the celestial city. Listen, this is this Christian on his journey to the celestial city. He says, "So soon as the man," he's referencing Moses, "overtook me, it was but a word and a blow. For down he knocked me and laid me for dead. But when I was a little come to myself again, I asked him wherefore he served me so." Could we talk like that again? That's beautiful. Moses said, "Because of your secret inclining to Adam the first." In other words, you're one of the ones who always screws up. "And with that, he struck me another deadly blow and beat me down backward. So I lay at his feet as dead before." Have you ever felt like you just can't ever keep enough of the rules and you're just like, it just beats me back? "So when I came to myself again, I cried, 'Mercy!' But he said," listen, "I know not how to show mercy." And with that, he knocked me down again. "He had doubtless made an end of me, but that one," he's talking about Jesus, "came by and bid him forbear." Oh, that's like, if you get all that, that's like an amen just waiting to happen. You know what religious darkness always results in? Right before verse 12 is chapter 8, verses 1 to 11. It's the story of the woman caught in adultery. And they find her. Interestingly, the man is absent. They bring her. Jesus, this woman was caught in adultery. And they're picking up stones, ready to throw them at her. And Jesus very famously says, "Hey, whoever's without sin, throw the first stone." And starting the oldest to the youngest, they put them and walked away. What does religious darkness always result in? It always results in people picking up rocks. Always. Now I want you to notice what happens in the New Testament toward religious people. Here's Paul in the book of Acts. He's preaching to religious people who think that religious darkness is the way you turn on the light, that you keep all the rules enough and then God will love you. And this is what he says. I love this. Is so beautiful. "Let it be known to you, brothers, that through this man, Jesus, forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you. And by him," listen, "everyone who believes is freed from everything from which you could not be freed by the law of Moses." Come on. Here's the last thing Jesus' light does. Jesus' light makes reality clear, because what it does is it helps us to heal our understanding of God. Now, don't miss what Jesus is saying here. You could go back to the beginning of John's gospel, and he's describing when Jesus came into the world in John chapter 1, verse 4 and 5, and he says, "In him, Jesus was life, and that life was," there it is again, "the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." Here's what he's saying. Jesus is not enlightened. Jesus didn't go through a process. God is not in a process of becoming. God already is. He's not enlightened. He is light itself. He's the source of all illumination and seeing. Here's what John is saying. Jesus is telling us. He's giving us a promise. "I'm the light of the world. If you're walking in darkness, whoever that person is, if you'll follow me, you won't have to walk in that darkness anymore." That's a beautiful promise. Jesus is God come into the darkness of the world. If I could, I would have turned the lights off and I would have pulled the shades. And what I would have illustrated for you, that I would have just turned a little flicker of a light on, like I could have just, had a cigarette lighter or something. Sorry, cigarette. Can you say that in church? Cigarette lighter? A lighter. I just did. I don't smoke, but so I would have turned it on, and you would have seen that in a dark room, it just takes a little bit of light to illuminate the room, right? Everybody sees it. It's very dark, little light illuminates it. But actually, it's so interesting. Into the very, very deep darkness of the world, God comes himself and is the brightest light. Into the darkest place, God sends the brightest light. Jesus is the light who illuminates everything. So here's how John says it in his other letter in 1 John. He says, this is the message we've heard from him and declare to you. God's light. In him, there's no darkness at all. If you're looking for a way to understand and define God and you're on a spiritual journey, here it is. Light. There's no darkness in God. None at all. There's no shadows. God doesn't do one thing and then pull the rug out from underneath you later. That's not what God's like. You can have their understanding of God healed by this message from Jesus that God is light. There's no darkness in him whatsoever. So there's a healing of our understanding of God, but then there's also a healing of our understanding about what you and I have been through. Here's how Paul says it in Ephesians. He says, for you were once darkness, like you were it. You quite lived in darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. He goes on, he says, for the fruit of light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, and find out what pleases the Lord. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. It's shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret. And then listen to what he says in verse 13. Maybe you've never caught this. I hadn't caught this. I was like, what? Verse 13, but everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. You listen to a message like this, and if you're honest, you simply recognize that you've been through some darkness in your life. Anybody honest? That's what I love about Christianity is that Christianity's honest. It doesn't say deny the fact that you've been through darkness. It says recognize that you've been in darkness and that it's disorienting to you. And you know that you've been in places in your life where you valued the wrong things. You didn't understand what was important. And you went the wrong way. You didn't know which way to go. And it was dark. And there were wounds done to you and by you. And you participated in them. And you still today are wrestling with what that wound means. And you're like, I've done all that. What do I do now? And here's what Paul is saying in Ephesians. He's saying you can be healed in such a way that the wound that you've been through, remember, everything is illuminated, becomes a light. The wound you've been through can become a source of light for someone else. Think about what Jesus did on the cross. What Jesus did on the cross is he took on wounds, and it is out of his wounds, the wounds to his hands and to his feet and to his side, the wounds to his body being broken on the cross. Out of his deepest wounds are his greatest ministry, because we talk about the cross as, like Isaiah said, he bore our sins on the cross, and by his stripes, by the wounds he experienced, we find healing. So Jesus' greatest wounds become the source of his greatest ministry. That's for you, but it's also a path illuminating, like if you could get in the place of understanding that God comes in to expunge the darkness out of you and bring light into you where that darkness was, then that darkness that you've been through that you don't know what to do with can become a source of healing and ministry to other people. Are you following what I'm saying?